This is the world you are graduating into. This is what I want to talk about today with you for a few minutes. I believe we, and particularly you, your class, has an incredible window of opportunity to lead in shaping a new world order for the 21st century in a way consistent with American interest and the common interest. Think of the possibilities. For the first time in history, the Western Hemisphere is in a position where it has the possibility of being middle class, democratic, and secure from Canada to Chile. The Pacific Basin, peaceful and prosperous. A new relationship with China where we cooperate and compete, but where conflict is not inevitable. A revitalized global trading order defined by greater integration and economic growth, where barriers are lowered at the borders and behind our borders, generating millions of American jobs, where intellectual property is protected and the playing field is level.
It is time for us to stand up and say, there is a better way to use our wealth. Such a movement must be willing to think creatively and boldly about the world that we would like to see. In other words, think big. What kind of world do you want to see? We must take the opportunity to reconceptualize a global order based on human solidarity. We need a new order. Our job is to reach out to those in every corner of the world. Our job is to build on our common humanity. We know that those forces are working today across national borders. We must do the same and create an international progressive community.
And when they did that, they, as I've told you before, because I love it so much, they also created the Great Seal of the United States. And that Great Seal of the United States has on it, Novus Order Seclorum, a new order for the centuries, for the ages, forever.
Now he gives a description of the beast. The beast which I saw was like a leopard. His feet were as the feet of a bear. His mouth was the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, his seat, and great authority. Go back to chapter number 12 and verse 3. Who's the dragon? There appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. His tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and it cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven. The last place you would expect war. War in heaven. Michael, who is mentioned in the book of Daniel, stands for the people of Israel. He is an archangel. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. the great red dragon. And the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan. So the dragon is identified. There can be no doubt in your mind whatsoever the dragon is the devil, Satan. I do not believe that the devil is simply a malevolent force. I believe the devil is a being, a spirit being with enormous power. The Bible said he called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him.
How the revolution of Vatican II serves the New World Order. I am speaking personally to you through this video message, which was produced a few days before the 2020 Catholic Identity Conference, between the evolution of the global political framework and the role that the Catholic Church has assumed in the establishment of the New World Order. We know that the New World Order project consists in the establishment of tyranny by Freemasonry. We can say that the New World Order is the antithesis of Christian society. It seems quite evident to me that the end of times are now approaching before our eyes. And this open religion is perfectly in tune with the intention of globalism, from the political meeting for a new humanism, blessed by the leaders of the Church, to the participation of the progressive intelligentsia in green propaganda. It all chases after the mainstream thought, in the sad and grotesque attempt to please the world, always in view of this communion of intent between the New World Order and the anti-church. In Fratelli Tutti, the Pope embraced the universal brotherhood, the great principle of modern Freemasonry, thus exposing himself to the risk of being declared heretic and losing the power.
I was certainly referring to the threats that we are now facing with this stated goals of this administration, which would upset the last 70 years of a new world order which was established after World War II. A fundamental part of that new world order was a free press. I hate the press. I hate you especially, but
A vote for Biden is a vote to give control of government over to the globalists and communists and socialists and wealthy liberal hypocrites. Hypocrites who want to silence, censor, cancel, and punish you. These are real trouble. If you want your children to be safe, if you want your values to be respected, if you want to be just treated with dignity and respect, then I am asking you tomorrow to go out and vote for your all-time favorite president. Because we still have work to do.
So we're calling this Future Earth 2020. Where are we going? What lies ahead for not just this nation, but also the world as we go into this new dynamic decade? Below that is the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. This is Earth's first global constitution involving every nation on Earth. These are the days that we're living in now. A day that will see global governance and centralization of all governments. On your screen you see the predominant three models of the world constitution and of new constitutions at large. In 1972, the New World Money System was published by Willard Cantillon, in which he spoke in terms of a moneyless system that was coming in the next century. In 1974, a Constitution for the World, the first model, came out in 1965, constructed by the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions in Santa Barbara, California. That was followed in 1977 with the first model of a Constitution to the Federation of Earth. A newer model, more recent model, came out in 1991, and we'll point that in just a moment. Bottom left is the new flag of the new states of America. We were divided into 10 regions in 1972 by Executive Order 11647, issued by President Richard Nixon, dividing our nation into 10 federal regions. Each region had its own capital, apart from the state capitals that already existed. These are now known as the FEMA regions. This new Earth Constitution, or this new Earth Parliament, is becoming its new name. Not just a world parliament, but a new Earth or United Earth Parliament. Here's a sample of the new flag. This is what the new world flag looks like, and it's also been selected by NASA to be the official emblem on the suits, the astronaut suits, to Mars. So no longer an American emblem, but the new Earth emblem on those spacesuits. But to say that even our weather systems are prophetically speaking to us, and I don't intend to sound like a madman here, but I want you to pay attention to the deterioration of everything around us, not just the political and the economic, but also meteorological. And the Bible talks about how you will see strange signs in the heavens and on the earth. Men's hearts failing them for fear, stressing out, no place to turn, no place to hide.
In peace. We love the Catholic people. We love the Catholic religion. And above all, we respect it greatly. As president, I will always support you in your effort to serve our fellow citizens and to lift up all humanity. I will protect the Catholic Church, and I will defend the rights of religious believers of every race.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order. Is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order.
Fear not, for your war-stricken, poverty-ridden planet. You are safe. Is on the way. Your prosperity is the core objective of our universal design. The path for humanity has spanned throughout ages to ensure the survival and prosperity of the human species. War is a liar who claims there isn't enough land, isn't enough wealth, isn't enough food for all people in all places to live in abundance. A different age is upon us. Fear not for the bursting across your red horizons. Prepare your life for the light that grows steadily brighter in the distance. As the dawn comes to rid your battlefields of darkness, the age of Illuminati will begin. Fear nothing. We are always watching out for you.
And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Beware of false prophets, which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves.
Should you be planning to fly out over the holidays, public health officials expect all travelers to quarantine when they return.
The State House Committee on COVID-19 continued its series of public health hearings today. Discussions centered around Hawaii's future statewide vaccination program.
Hundreds of protesters spent hours on the freeway to make a statement about the election.
Diana says the opportunity to have one last dinner together, and shoppers rush to make last-minute purchases as the UK heads into a second national lockdown.
The protest in Portland tonight, but much smaller than what we saw last night and with a lot less damage.
Aleksandr Hoff is in Wilmington with more on what both candidates had to say today about the status of vote counting in Pennsylvania and other crucial battleground states.
2 days after Election Day, and we're still waiting to learn who will become the next president of the United States.
Now at 11 on KPIX5 and streaming on CBSN Bay Area. Breaking news out of Philadelphia, where police have stopped an alleged plot to attack a vote counting site.
The United States have this kind of regular testing where people were alerted early.
About reopening, Birx said it's not the public spaces, stores and restaurants where precautions are in place that she's concerned about. Birx says households are her biggest concern.
Arrest as a result.
I just got a call from the precinct. They will be arresting me Monday morning. I'll be taken in for inciting a riot.
Among the restrictions, schools are fully remote in red and orange zones for at least 2 weeks. The state is deploying 400,000 rapid testing kits in part to help schools in yellow zones test students weekly.
Students will be escorted to the testing area. The swab will be in the nose for just 5 to 10 seconds.
Our capacity.
The number of deaths per day in Colorado remains in the single digits. The largest number since midsummer was 9 deaths September 30th. July 28th was the last time that we saw double digits, with 10 that day.
Social distancing or all things health officials continue to push as the best ways to lower our numbers.
The recall affects 500 mg and 750 mg tablets sold under the name TimeCap Labs Inc. Those tablets are either embossed with 101 or 102 on one side and are plain on the other.
It's just money and credit. It is a stress test. The world will be very different. There'll be a new world order.
There are 3 stages really in monetary policy. And the cycle that we are in, the whole world cycle, began in 1945. That was the beginning of the New World Order. 1944, we established the dollar as the world's reserve currency. It was connected to gold. And then until 1971, that broke up. And so there was an arc in which central banks have the capacity to produce demand by producing credit. Just sort of hit a button and poof, and demand rises because credit comes out. But when interest rates no longer are effective and hit zero, as they did in 2008, you go to a monetary policy, which I call monetary policy 2, which is the printing of money and the buying of financial assets. And with that, there was the implications of that. Lots of liquidity in the world, bidding up asset prices. And we had an environment which was very good for capitalism, corporate tax cuts. All of that caused asset prices to rise. And then, of course, it also contributes to the wealth gap. The long-term debt cycle and monetary policy is an overarching influence. And it's important to understand where we are in that cycle. Related to that cycle is also the wealth gap cycle, periods of prosperity that occur after wars, during periods of peace. There are periods of peace because there's a dominant power that no one wants to fight, and you have a
prosperous period. And during those periods, there's a lot of development of credit, a lot of also expansion of prosperity and so on, technology development, and that creates wealth gaps. And then along with those wealth gaps, values gaps and political gaps. And so that influence is a giant influence. So that's number two. And then number three, as the major influence, is the rise of a great power to challenge the existing world leadership of the United States. And these cycles have happened over periods of time. That competition, that wars of various types, trade wars and the like, is another factor. So those factors are in place and were in place before we had the virus. The virus came along and is a knockback, and it has big financial implications. The way the system works is central banks put money on deposit, and banks come along and they borrow that money and lend it to those who they expect will pay back. And that then passes through the credit system, and then all financial assets compete with each other, and it spreads out. Credit gets expanded, and then there's the issue of payback, and then we have the cycles. Money's too loose, inflation rises, central banks put money on, tighten money, and it slows down, and we go through our cycles. That's no longer the case. Today, the economy and the markets are driven by the central banks and the coordination with the central government. What I mean by that is the purchases right now of financial assets by the Federal Reserve, or the purchases by the Federal Reserve of government securities, are the drivers of that market. So the production of the money, if you look at money and you look at who is in the market. So the Federal Reserve, for example, will set an interest rate that for different types of creditors based on its economic objective. In the old days, let's say when we had the 2008 financial crisis, we needed to protect banks because they were systemically important, and then money market funds and commercial paper and the like. Now it's much broader than that. The whole economy is systemically important. If they didn't go out and make lending to companies, including what we call fallen angels, those that were just above investment grade and fell into investment grade, we would lose large parts of our economy. And so we're in a situation now where they're the market makers. Take the market out, take the central banks out, and you have a different story. Think about it in Europe, for example. The central bank will lend to banks at a -1%. So that means you don't have interest payments. In fact, you have interest credits. And the central banks will take that debt on. They'll own it. And they have a political agenda, not an economic agenda, in which they'll determine whether they'll be paid back or when they want to be paid back based on how the economy is doing and what will happen. So in that case, like an example in Europe and the similar situations in the United States and Japan in varying degrees, they will make loans that will have interest credits almost, or let's say zero. You don't have to pay interest back, and you may not have to pay principal back. It depends on what the conditions are at the time. Driven by so those central banks, not only their actions, but their desire to be an owner of those assets, and their priorities about that ownership when they buy and when they sell are not the same as the classic free market allocations. And as a result, the capital markets are not free markets allocating resources in the traditional ways. The limiting factor has to do with the demand for that money and debt. In other words, what debt is, a bond, is a promise to receive a lot of currency. And so when it gives no good return and there's a printing of a lot of currency, clearly it's not desirable relative to other things for private investors. However, the central bank can buy it too. And so the limit has to do with the limit of demand. And that limit of demand has to do with the central bank's purchases of that because they could buy it and hence there's no problem. So you look at periods of time of where in history, where was the most of it that has ever taken place? And the war years was an example. I think the most analogous period we're in now was 1930 to 1945. You first had the Depression, and in that Depression, and when you hit zero interest rates, you had the printing of money and the buying of financial assets, and then you had a lot of fiscal policy, so programs that produced large deficits, which then were monetized by more of that. And then you went into the war years, and the war years, very similar to now in terms of the need for a lot of money and credit, produced an enormous amount of money and credit, but it was managed by the central bank in a way where they were de facto taking that on. It was a good example of testing the limits of that. Now, we went into periods where, what is an alternative source of wealth? And as I say, it could be stocks, gold, it could be other assets, but those became the boundaries. What would happen in terms of this limit is if something transpired where the dollar as a reserve currency, the holders outside, made another market that was a better market. It could be gold, it could be stocks. But when that happens, and I think it will happen, then it looks like a currency defense. If money leaves that asset, if those who are holding bonds don't want to hold the bonds because they have lousy returns and they're printing a lot of money and they want to go to something else, and that starts to accelerate, should that happen, then what that does is it puts the central bank in the position of having to decide whether it buys more bonds in order to fill in that gap.